Good morning and welcome to the North Tropics. So in the northern dry tropics in Australia, gardening has a different set of challenges. It's dry for about 9 months of the year, and where I live and where I garden, the soils are heavy clay, and I'll go through some of the aspects of my garden beds and why I have chosen to do them the way that I have and what works for me here. And hopefully you might take some points away and it might be useful for you in your gardening endeavours. Okay, so this is my first garden bed, and the design that I've put in is a raised garden bed. So I've used 2 bricks high and I've filled it in, and I've used compost that's been built up over probably the last 3 years, and these are the veggies that we've been growing. So we've got some purple beans growing on a trellis, and these beans are quite delicious and tasty. And also we've got a number of tomatoes. So we find up in the dry tropics the little cherry tomatoes. We've got different varieties, very tasty, much more flavoursome than the supermarket tomatoes. They grow quickly, there's not enough time for insects to attack and eat them, so we get in and eat them first. Also we've got a number of greens. So no pesticides here, just compost and tasty greens. Also we've got, this garden bed is nearly towards the end of what we were growing in it, and we've just thrown in some beans to try and add some more nitrogen into the soil. And you can see some of the tomatoes are just, still plenty of tomatoes to come. Down here we do have a little bit of kale tucked away. Very tasty, even eating it raw is quite nice. And also some mizuna, I'm not sure what the English name is, but this is edible as well. And if you're after something a little bit spicy, the flowers are actually edible too. Just make sure there's no bees in there when you go to eat them. And around this side, a bit more of the same. We've got some other salad greens. They're towards the end of their run now. They're quite tasty. And even having just the daggy old trellis coming off the other trellis makes it much easier to pick your tomatoes, a bit easier to spot. Okay, so that's the first garden bed that I've put in. This one's near the end. We'll go and have a look at another one that's about halfway through. So if you just follow me over this way. So here we did plant a kale forest, and people have been quite amazed at how delicious and tasty, how crisp, holds its freshness. You can pick it and it's still quite crisp in the afternoon, sitting on a bench. We've been probably having these for about 6 weeks or so. Very good compost down the end of this raised bed. Now, one of the reasons I put in the raised beds is that when our wet season does come, we can get a large amount of rain in a few days. We might get, in a big rain event, say 300 mils of rain, and that can often rot out your vegetables. So that's why I've opted for a raised garden bed for good drainage. Okay, as we go down a bit further, we've got lots more salad greens here. You can see how wonderful and fresh they look. We don't use any pesticides, so some of them the bugs will get in and have a bit of a feast, but that's okay. Some for us, some for the bugs. And I don't know if we can get a picture here, but some of these greens have gone to seed, and you'll see the little black, these are our native bees. I don't know if we can zoom in on that. Oh, that's not a bee, that's something else. But over there, I don't know if we can zoom in and get a picture, but we have stingerless little native bees. So they're having a ball here. We've also planted some beans down this end just to throw a bit more nitrogen into the soil for us, so let the beans do the work. And I did get in a load of soil to raise this bed up. I just did not have enough compost soil. So down this end I did use some what was called veggie mix, which was a mixture of mill mud, cane trash, and a lot of sand and some horse manure. It does have a very high sand content, so it's got good drainage, and then I just add my own compost to it as time goes by to just gradually keep increasing the quality of the soil. Now if we move on to my third garden bed over here, so this garden bed is just pretty much some of the veggie mix that I've had come in. I've cemented in 2 poles, which you can see at either end. Those poles I'll then add a metal trellis to, and I'll be able to grow my climbing veggies here, and this will gradually get raised up over time to up to the top of the bricks with good compost that I'm making at home. Okay, so what I use for composting in North Queensland, and I've found is the best for me, is these large style compost bins. They seal very well, and the best thing about them is it retains the moisture, so my compost doesn't dry out. I throw virtually anything organic into these compost bins, and I place them in a position where they get the sun, so they get very hot. This allows it to break down bacteria, viruses, so that I don't get them multiplying in the bin. The creatures that are living in the bin, going from your bacteria and microbes up to small invertebrates, up to cockroaches and slaters, and they smash through the compost very quickly, giving me a great quality soil. So I'm going to pull the lid off now, and we'll see if we can get a look at what's running around. It's got a bit hotter, so a lot of the larger creatures will go down in the compost bin. So if we just move the camera in a bit closer and get ready, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if you zoom in there, we can see there's lots of slaters here. They're up the top at the moment. Just go slowly and zoom in and just let it focus. So I'm throwing in things like my weeds. I've got this that's falling off my banana tree. We'll just pan up to the banana tree, and you can see up here I've got a hand of bananas growing. Okay, and the other things in the compost bin, as you can see, I'm throwing in paper, and the creatures are chewing through that. This was some old vines and bean waste, and as we go down a bit deeper, I've got lots of dry waste in here. Lots of leaf mulch from mango trees was thrown in, and you can see that's slowly starting to break down. Rightio, now we'll go over to another compost bin. Just pan back and move across. So this compost bin, I just dug out the wet mushy stuff that was on top, and I filled that up into another compost bin. That's to increase the volume and increase the heat in that compost bin. So this one here, if we have a look, lots of cockroaches scurrying around. This is starting to break down and look a bit better, and this one I'm just going to keep adding more material to it. As you can see, I throw in things like orange peel. A lot of composters don't recommend to put it in it because it's high in citric acid. No, I wouldn't go. They often go mouldy, but if there's only a little bit in your compost bin and it's getting quite hot, they will break down, they will get eaten, and it will turn into good soil. And this is going to make absolutely beautiful soil. Lots of creatures in there. I do throw in meat, so you can see there's some bone material. So bones are made out of calcium phosphate, and there's one thing that compost is normally missing, and it's phosphate. So if you're throwing bones and they're breaking down slowly in your compost, it's good for your soil, good for the plants you're going to grow, because it's a source of phosphate. So you can see you've got that mixture of a lot of dry material in here. I have taken a lot of wet material off the top and thrown it into my third compost bin, which we'll have a look at now. So I'll put this lid back on. Okay, third compost bin. This is the one that I'm currently filling. So all of our kitchen scraps, which is high in nitrogen and a high liquid content, go in here. But I have dug in and thrown in a lot of other material from compost bin number 2. But you can see there'll be lots of creatures running around here, little invertebrates, lots of slaters, lots of cockroaches. and they'll be doing a wonderful job for me. And as you go down a bit, oh, there we go, have a look in the sky. Right out. That's the larva of the American soldier fly. Now this larva here eats meat. So these guys are great. We get the soldier flies hang around the compost, lay their larva, and they'll actually break down any meat waste that's in here. So if you get your compost bin hot, you can do some pretty amazing composting and compost things that people say you can't normally compost. And I've been doing that successfully here for 15 years. No worries at all. You do want to try and get a good ratio of dry material thrown in with your wet material, so you get your right ratio of carbon, which tends to be your drier brown things like these dried out leaves and paper, high in carbon, and then your wet mushy stuff from your kitchen scraps, that'll be much higher in nitrogen. Okay, so that's, and I will just pan around to, we did find this an old sand pit, and we changed it from being a big square one into a long rectangular one, and then we filled that up with soil, and we've thrown in various plants in here, and we're not buying any greens at all from the supermarket, and our greens are much tastier. We know where they come from. We don't use any pesticides. Highly recommend it. Once again, the raised garden bed is what we find works very well for us in the dry tropics. Okay, now we're going to go across to my open compost, and in the open compost bin that I have, or pile, I don't throw in any high nitrogen waste like kitchen scraps or any meat or cheese, because I don't want to encourage rats here. We do have chickens as well, so whenever you've got chickens, it can be problematic to keep control of mice and rats. But we'll leave that for another episode. So let's go over and have a look at the open compost pile, and I'm going to dig it out and see what's underneath. Okay, this is my open compost pile. So yeah, once again, I'm mostly just throwing in garden waste into here, so I don't want to create odours. Any of the mushier composting materials I do put into the closed, sealed up compost bins, which works very well. So if you come in a bit closer, we'll see what's in here. You can see all the plant material from around my yard here. I do actually get some leaves from my neighbour's property as well. And it goes down a bit deeper, and I probably started filling this one maybe 3 months ago. So it hasn't been in particularly long. Normally I leave it in for about 6 months. But today I want to dig this one out and try and get some nice compost to add to my third raised veggie garden patch. So let's have a look what happens when I dig it out. Oh, first I'll explain. I normally lay things long ways in here, the trimmings, and that helps them pack down, keep the moisture in there, and allow the bugs and the microbes to break it down. Sometimes I do throw a few heavy things on top to help press all the dry waste down. So we can see up one end it's very dry. I'm not going to pull that end out. I don't think that'll be very good at this stage. But I'll work down this end, pull off all the uncomposted material on top, and then we'll have a look at what's down a bit deeper. I'll have to move a few bricks out of the way as well. And we'll see what's growing in here, what creatures. So as I'm pulling back the bricks, I can see there's masses of slaters have been in here, so they're all scurrying away at the moment. And I'll just remove a big piece of concrete. There. So move back a little bit, so I'll trip over you. Branches from our curry tree out the front. So they're quite dry and they're going to take a little while to break down. So I'll just keep piling this stuff over there, and then that end of the that was trimmings from our tea tree out in our front nature strip. This was material from our banana tree. trimmings from Happy Plants. And here just an assortment of just normal weeds. I'm cleaning up around the garden. Oh, hey, have a look here. So that was, the slaters had found a nice spot, and you can see that there's just masses of them, and those fellas are working so hard, probably 16 hours a day, breaking down items, creating wonderful soil for me. So they're all going to head off and try and hide in the dark somewhere. Okay, can we get a shot of this? Let's skip that. So a lot of this material is just the leaves that are being broken apart by the invertebrates that are in the pile. I mean, this is going to make fantastic compost. Over here, some of this was clay material that I did dig out of my garden and I threw into the compost pile. I didn't worry about mixing it, I was just throwing it in. I don't want to do a minimal amount of work to try and generate good soil. Just go back a little bit and I'll start digging. So now, let's see what I can get out of the pile. To add into my garden bed. So you can see down deeper I did have, there's mango branches and mango leaves. In my garden bed I don't need it all to be completely broken down. I'm happy to throw it in like this and let it continue to break down in the garden bed. And that'll just keep adding carbon to my soil. It's available for the plants. That's quite clayey, that's material that I dug out that was just rock hard. But as I add in more carbon it frees up the soil and makes a nice friable texture. Okay, so I've dug down to the bottom of my open compost pit. So if you come in a bit closer you can see what it looks like down the bottom. Just don't trip over those bricks there. Okay, so the soil's quite dark there. The soils here are actually a really pale clay and quite thick. And as the leaves break down, it just turns the soil into a beautiful dark, rich colour. So this compost was only about 3 months old, and it really wasn't ready to dig up. I'm going to put some of it into my garden bed now and let it to continue break down in there. This one I'm going to cover back over and throw more garden waste, and probably it's now early October and our dry season. You can see this is quite wet, so I do actually sprinkle this occasionally, and I can see the moisture content's fantastic. I don't need to put any more water in here. There's a good moisture level which aids in the composting. Dry compost just won't break down in the dry tropics, or very, very, very slowly. So we'll add this barrow load to our third garden bed, and this will add lots of carbon in the soil, which will be great. Here I'm going to allow it to break down, and I'll probably dig it out probably around Christmas time. Our wet season in Townsville and dry tropics is really late December, January, February, March. So I'll get the soil out before then. Things are growing pretty rapidly, and then I'll be able to refill this with heaps of garden clippings and prunings, and then I'll get my next lot. out of half of this compost pile here, when it's turned into really good compost, I get about 5 builder barrow loads, which you can see here. I get about 5 of these, the full-on black rich soil it's all broken down. You'll see very little wooden leaves in it. I get fantastic quality. So anyway, we'll cut that off there and I'll go on. Okay, we're back at garden bed number 3. I'm just going to add 1 wheelbarrow in. Spread that round on top. Now with this garden bed I did bury down deeper some large logs, so that'll be a slow release carbon into my soil. I can try and cut it up and throw it out, but it's a resource for me. So I've buried that deep underneath the soil. Probably just below ground level. I've dug down just below ground level, so I've put in some good wood there. I'll add another layer to this. This will help keep the moisture in the soil, and we'll probably look at planting this in maybe another 3 or 4 weeks once I add a bit more material to it. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. Okay, I was about to pack up for the day, but I did come across a bag of vermiculite that I'd tucked away in the shed. The vermiculite was being thrown out, but I've grabbed it for my garden. So it says some of the uses here for vermiculite, so you can read that for yourself. It's a very lightweight product. It's chemically very inert. So let's have a look at what it looks like. So here's some of the material in my hands here. Now vermiculite is a phyllosilicate, so if I get one piece here, you can see I can pull it apart and there's little plates of minerals there. It's quite shiny, it's micas, so it's mostly aluminium and silica. Now I'm going to add this into my vegetable garden bed. Not so much, it's not adding any nutrients as such, but it's very good at holding onto moisture and creating a more friable soil. And since I got it for free, hey, let's not put it to waste, let's use it. So this bag here, it's about the same as your 20 kilo bags of say chicken feed or something. It's about double the size, but as you can see down here, the weight of it is only 6 kilos. So let's whack this into the garden. And I might add some into the other one as well. So I might keep this bag here because it's a bit longer than normal, and I do use these bags to put over my hands of bananas that are growing on my banana tree. As you can see, if we quickly pan across, up here, that was a chicken feed bag for just your chicken feed for our layers. But the hand of bananas here is already sticking out the bottom, and then if you come and have a shot underneath, you'll be able to see up into the bag the bananas. Now we put the bag over the hand of bananas because we do get a lot of fruit bats here, and they land on the hand of bananas, and their little claws wreck up the bananas and make them look terrible. And then as they do get ripe, they will chew into them and go through a hand of bananas pretty quickly. So I might actually use this longer bag, because I'm going to get more bananas off this one yet. Okay, thank you for watching.